We're the excess pie dough that hangs out after a pie is made, and we're going to be made into this stuff in the United States they call cinnamon pie. And then you put this down on a sheet of on a cookie sheet,
all right,
and then you put butter or oil on it, and then you sprinkle the cinnamon and sugar on it. Now, if we imagine the cinnamon and sugar is the time stuff, what they're doing is two different approaches. They've got a little guy running around on the pie crust that's either got a funnel to concentrate the cinnamon and sugar into a spot, or he's got an umbrella to kind of shield it. Now, if he's got an umbrella, the extra cinnamon and sugar that he's shielding goes to the edge of the umbrella and it sort of falls off. Well, I think that's actually occurring in nature, and this extra time stuff that they've been screening out is falling off and affecting people. Does that sort of make sense?
I'm getting it.
Well, think of it this way. What if, and this is only a hypothetical, but since we kind of figure the breakthrough took place in some of these technologies in 1956, what if moving around of time stuff, either concentrating or watering down time, if you will, had something to do with the ability of UFOs to do inexplicable right turns, left turns, up downs without squishing its occupants? One of the ways you could do that would be by manipulating the time stuff inside or outside of that, right?
Correct.
Okay. And when you see or read reports of UFO activity, what is commonly associated with those besides missing time? So we're not saying necessarily that it's that way, but we're getting enough inputs from people who are having these
episodes. Episodes.
Yeah, they're having these episodes.
All right, episodes.
And so whether or not that happens to be, I don't know if it's a TR3B or if it's off-worldy or if it's the breakaway civilization guys.
Or if it's just some guys in a lab tinking around with a technology they hope to use in a medical device.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have a shutdown super collider down here in Texas.
Yeah, exactly.
Shutdown.
How many people does it take to start affecting what you do? 10 people? 100? 1,000? How many do you think you need?
You mean in terms of salting the data?
Yeah.
It would be really difficult because we don't really work at the data level. We work at an archetype level. So I would notice it, for instance, if someone, in fact, we've caught people trying to do similar things. I don't think they were aimed at us. With as little as 5 people in organized groups, I've caught a memering effort that I'm sure traces back to the Pentagon. I could find as little as 5 or 6 people using the same language set, trying to push the same agenda through the same spoken soundbite kind of things.
I see what you mean.
Okay, but usually what happens, if someone came on in and flooded the Internet with 1 million particular kinds of images, right, we would filter them out because they would all be so consistent and so similar that we would know it's a data distortion and we're trying to get at the difference.
Okay, because if one person, let's say, did it 1 million times, you'd figure that out.
Oh, it wouldn't even get as far as me. I mean, I've got software that screens all that out. Bear in mind, we've got, at this point, nearly 400 executable programs that run. Some of the spiders are relatively huge with, 10, 20, 30,000 lines of filter code in C++.
You folks have been very, very accurate about great quakes, big quakes like what happened in Chile. Haiti was a big one as well. You see many of them. Almost, 6, you say?
Correct. We still think there are 6 pending for the rest of this year, yes.
Jeez.
And on the big order, I mean, technically the description of a great quake is an 8.0 for a geologist, but we kind of look at Haiti because of the huge loss of life as qualifying as a great quake. Linguistically, it's been a great quake because...
Yeah, we're looking at it from a human viewpoint, correct?
Yeah, and so from a headline standpoint, I mean, all the suffering, it's still going on. And just about every day I wake up and look at the USGS data and go, okay, where next?
Do you know exactly where when you say 6 more?
No, geography, you have to understand how the Internet works for us. The way the spiders work, we're looking after a small delta or difference in numeric values relative to linguistic terms. And so the most often repeated terms on the Internet outside of numbers are geographic references. So usually we throw those out. And we just make a little tick mark, to the south, that kind of thing, if it's pertinent. So our geographic references, I wish I could do that. It would really aid things because then we'd be able to say likelihood of the quake is here. it's rare that we actually get anything that is even more than a banding. The best we've done, I think, George, you'd have to say would be like the banding for the Kashmir quake, right? The 33rd degree latitude thing.
Actually, it was 34. And the real short story there, George, was I was out doing a design build move of a recording studio from Burbank over to Alhambra in 2005, and I'd been looking at the data from Clif throughout 2005, and it kept coming back to 34 north, big earthquake. Well, I don't know if you realize that Burbank is 34 north, and it's, seismically not the place you want to be in a big earthquake.
Well, that's true.
So I blew out of Southern California on March 2nd, got back to the ranch, and Elaine and I are watching TV here, and October 8th, along comes the smackdown 76,000, I think it was, dead in the Kashmir quake. And I'm going, oh, well, at least it wasn't our 34 north, but, I mean, it's still a horrific thing to, now, I won't say know it in advance, but Clif, to a larger degree than me, goes into these, fugues, funks, because it's like having to live the bad news twice.
Well, a lot of people I know are talking about a big one in Southern California. And they feel it. Geologists feel it, and they just sense that something's going to happen.
And that's what we pick up. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. The problem is, if we get an 8.0 there, then there's this whole other terrible thing that starts coming into play, which Clif and I have gamed out on the phone. What happens if the Pacific plate is breaking, and we had, remember that up on one end of the plate we've got the southern islands of Japan. You come straight line, great circle down through the Hawaiian Islands, and you end up where? Northern Chile. And the other way, you go basically from Victoria, British Columbia, down great circle through Hawaii, and you end up down in Suva, Fiji, where, guess what's active now? So those are the kinds of things that, I won't say we lose sleep over, but it doesn't give us any comfort as humans, because how do you prepare for something like that?
And we have to acknowledge that the data itself suggests that that's one of the outcomes of these series of quakes that will occur over 2010 and maybe into early 2011. So the thing we that has us concerned is very similar to what happened in the Banda Aceh quake. There used to be two plates, or a single plate there, the Indo-Australian plate, and it cracked diagonally and caused the tsunami, and it cracked into the Indo plate and now the Australian plate.
And our problem with that particular prediction was we forecast, land driven back to a previous age,
300,000, yeah.
Yeah, 300,000 dead. That came out in an Alta report in, August, middle of August, late August, and we thought that the Redwood City quake down in...
No, the report actually came out much earlier than that.
Oh, no, it was
March or so, but correct, the events happened.
The events happened. The Redwood City quake during the Lacey Peterson trial emptied out the courthouse, met a lot of stuff, and we're going, oh, well, there weren't really 300,000 people dead. Then along comes the Boxing Day quake, and guess what?
Yeah. So our problem is that we have an effect called bleed-through. Bearing in mind that we're sort of inventing this as we go along, there are certain patterns we notice within our own work that we try and harmonize with, at least note whether they're interfering or helping. And so, George, your has come up with your postulate, which is based on how far out we see the data is going to be, how large its emotional impact or its ability to move society, and he's been accurate on that one. Then there's this filtering sort of an effect that he's talking about here as well, this you can't see, we get something that says quake, maybe even two quakes, but we can't really tell it's going to be two quakes, so we lump all of the data under a single quake. It's actually describing two quakes. When the early little one comes along, we think, oh, we blew the whole thing. We only got this amount of linguistics. Boy, were we wrong. And then a few months later, the bigger one shows up. We've got that kind of thing with the Pacific plate cracking.
We also have that happening, George, with death of the U.S. dollar, which has been associated with Novembers now for, 6-7 years, Clif?
Yeah.
And the problem is the more lead time we get, the more number of years that it prints through early, then the bigger the event is when it gets here. And we've had it in the data now long enough so that we could have Clif may not agree, but that's among gentlemen. my bet's on collapse of the dollar really does take place in November, and that takes down globalism, and that sets off the whole intermittent grid, the intermittent telecom systems, and all that.
And that would also feed into this, the alien wars meme and all the other stuff that we saw that was all really weird relative to the shadow government.
Exactly.
So George could be quite correct. It could be that our 4-day occurrence in there, from the 8th through the 11th inclusive, won't be any kind of a war, but it will be the huge emotional release that's associated with the death of a currency. Now, there is something to suggest that he's correct even more than what we've got, and that is that we knew we would come up with some pre-echoes in early March that would suggest what would occur relative to a specific hotspot in late July or August, that again, it was an echo to what would occur in November. And the early pre-echoes we got were all currency related. Greece did some stuff with their currency. We've had some currency moves here, etc. So indeed, it may be that in November, the dollar goes bluey.
But not only that, but when the dollar goes bluey, then globalism falls apart. And I don't know if you've thought through, George, how ugly that gets to be.
Well, I was going to ask you, do you see civil unrest here on the horizon?
Oh, that comes before.
Yeah, that's a precursor.
Yeah, all right, that's a prequel.
Way, but from July 8th onward, well, actually, we're in the okay. Let me go all the way back to what was it? Early part of 2009, we said that the revolution meme would go active in the end of the first quarter in 2010. And I think everybody would agree that the revolution meme in the United States has gone active in the sense of a number of events have occurred relative to that. And we were accurate in that. At the same time that we got those linguistics in the early part of 2009 about revolution meme going active, we also got a big emotional sweep for the revolution meme going very hot in July of 2010. Now that we're closer to it, we can see a little bit more clarity with what's going on.
And what would drive that, George, might be something like food prices skyrocketing because of terrible weather, unable to plant crops.
Or because of the planned devaluation of the dollar. Let's bear in mind the coast-to-coast guest last night, Mr. Williams, and the idea that the Illuminati are indeed slashing the purchasing power of the dollar in order to maintain certain things going at the moment.
Which would concentrate the purchasing power in the hands of the people that bought up the gold and silver. And we do know that certain British heads of state managed to sell gold when it was down under $300.
And we also know recently we've hit the juxtaposition of two twin data sets that are very important within our data work, and that is not only the currency issues that came out as a pre-echo, but at the same time that occurred, up pops this huge scandal relative to how silver has been artificially inflated hundreds of times by paper silver. And guess what? The whistleblower response that we've been waiting for also occurred when the person who blew the whistle on the silver scandal was nearly suicided by another driver in an accident. Let's call it an accident.
And I don't know if you know this, George, but my commodity broker called me up several months back and said, "Hey, George, do you realize that the gold and silver ETFs have fine print that they can give you the equivalent amount of paper? There is no gold deliverable." And I said, "What?" So you got to read the fine print.
Sure, that's their way out.
Of course.
I am concerned about this unrest because it could filter. Now, did you pick up the tea parties or the tense feeling over this health care program?
Yes, indeed, and we actually caught it in a couple of different ways. The first thing about the health was the obvious connection to Obama. We had picked up as early as probably early